Right, well, why don't we get formally started? Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining this presentation on Compliance Learning Goes Mobile. My name is Mark DeRoche with Interactive Services. I'll be hosting the session this morning, and I'm joined by Matt Plass, our Chief Learning Officer, who has really been driving our approach from an instructional and pedagogical design perspective in terms of how we approach mobile learning. He'll be sharing some of his insights. And then we have Neil Cullen, our Compliance Learning Director, who will be walking us through the latest and greatest that our team has produced in Dublin, Ireland, to support the adoption of mobile compliance training. Before I hand over to Matt to get us kicked off, if you go to any of the big shows, whether it's the American Society of Training, the MAISY conference, compliance learning and specifically mobile compliance learning has been discussed, I would say, for the past half decade. But it's really only been in 2016 when both the technology and the cultural adoption of mobile learning has risen. So for us as an organization, it's an area that we've been heavily investing in both research and also design resources. So we wanted to take 30 to 40 minutes to walk you through what we're seeing in the industry and also what we've been producing as we feel is best in class for mobile learning. Matt, do you want to just kick us off and give us a little bit of context as to how this presentation came about? And maybe, Neil, you could move the slide on at this stage.
Thank you, Mark. So mobile learning has been around for a while, as we're all aware. But I think one of the things we want to get across in this webinar is that a few things have changed. We've spent 5 years talking about what mobile learning is and what it should be. And in the meantime, just from a sort of cultural and an everyday working practice perspective, things have changed. And here's a great example to kick us off. You're on this webinar today because you received an email, probably from Neil, inviting you. And nearly half of the people on this webinar now, or certainly half of the respondents, open that email on their mobile device. Now, the chances are most of the people on the webinar are actually joining us now through their desktop or PC. And some perhaps on iPads, perhaps a very few on the phone. I'm not sure I would want to sit on a 40-minute webinar on my phone. But what is interesting is the number of people who now receive emails and communications through their phone. And I think one of the themes we're going to see as we walk through this webinar is how we've moved from a world in which mobile was something for a specific audience towards a world where actually mobile is all of us some of the time. And it's something that we need to take into consideration when we think about how we get across our compliance messages and our compliance training for the wider audience.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, before we dive into the main design recommendations, I'll just take literally 2 minutes to give a quick overview as to who Interactive Services is for those firms that are new to our organization. Our company has been in business for over 24 years, producing global compliance learning programs for large international organizations. Today we employ over 100 staff who are split between here in the US and our production center at Dublin, Ireland. In terms of what we've been doing in the compliance learning space, and you will see this on the next slide, I'll just give a moment for that to transition. We've been developing compliance learning programs since 2004, but it was only in 2015 that we launched our first ready-made product, which is CLC, and the idea behind that was to essentially create a Lego learning kit of online resources that could be used to produce a custom compliance learning program. And today it consists of over 70 5-minute topics that you can mix and match to create your own program. It's backed by the legal expertise of Cordery, who are part of the LexisNexis family of companies. And we've also set up a learning advisory board where we bring together our clients and industry leaders to talk about the future of compliance learning and what regulators are looking for. In the spring of 2016, we launched the second version of CLC version 2. I think some of the people on the phone today would have participated in that session. Since that launch, we've heavily invested in mobile learning, and today we have something that is fully mobile enabled and will offer the same quality of experience on an Android or Apple iOS device as you would get on a tablet or desktop. So that was really what was the impetus for moving to run this session today. In terms of the CLC offering, which you'll see here very briefly, essentially we've got 70 topics. It's been designed as a starting point for you to add your own story. So we have resources for linking out to your policies, creating interactions that are specific to your business, and then weaving in your policy hotline and overall compliance culture into the ready-made product that we have. We offer now close on 80 plus topics, and those run in areas such as anti-bribery. We'll just maybe wait for the slides to transition here. There we go. We offer over 80 topics now that cover key areas like anti-bribery, workplace conduct, ethics in the workplace, data privacy, and at the box we offer our training in 12 languages, but we can also support additional languages as needed. Just to wrap up, we talked briefly there about how we brought Cordery on board. Essentially, they are our eyes and ears in the industry. So while today we'll be focusing on the pedagogical aspects of compliance training, Cordery really do bring the expertise around compliance here in the US and also from an international perspective. And as part of this series, they provide biannual briefings that give people like yourselves an update in terms of what's coming from a legal perspective and how it impacts individuals that work in compliance training. With that in mind, perhaps at this stage, Matt, I could pass over to you, and Neil, you can transition over the next slide, and we'll begin the main part of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So this is the key statement. Mobile learning is no longer nice to have, it's now essential. And I think we all instinctively know this. Over the recent years, we've worked with clients to create mobile solutions, knowing as we did so that we were targeting a small percentage of their audience, or perhaps a very specialist part of their audience. And as I mentioned earlier, that is one of the pieces we feel has changed. We all have mobile phones, we all have tablets, and we all have laptops, and we carry all three around with us every day. And the key change is that actually we all access content through our mobile devices some of the time, even if we're desk-based, even if we spend most of our day working on a desktop computer or a laptop. So in terms of compliance training, compliance messaging, the campaign across the year, mobile is no longer nice to have, it's increasingly becoming an absolute essential. I think if we look at the next slide, a few statistics that came out of the ATD, you can see, particularly the top left there, 25% of global internet page views come from mobile devices. This is because we are now very comfortable looking at content on our phones. And while we might not do it at our desk, while we have a computer in front of us, we do it in the canteen, we do it on our journeys to and from work, we do it in airports while we're waiting for planes. We now use that time to answer our emails and to absorb content. Going back to the original statistic, 47% of people who signed up for this webinar opened the email for the webinar on a mobile device. So it's become very much part of our working life as well as our personal life. Move on to the next slide. We're going to look at 5 concepts that we think are very important as you're considering your mobile strategy moving forward. The way we work has changed. The battle between HTML and Flash is over, and HTML has won. We're widening the audience. We want to talk a little bit about what we call the 1695 principle, which is good design for mobile. And we want to talk about the wider campaign. So what does it look like when you think beyond the formal training program and you use mobile as a vehicle for getting compliance messages out across the year? And as part of walking through these concepts, we're going to show you a couple of examples of how our content works in a mobile format. So the first piece is around the way that we work having changed. And I think that I already mentioned that we're now talking about all of us, not just the specialist audience, but the bring your own device is very important as well. It's a battle, again, that some corporates are still fighting to pick a single device that they standardize across the company. The BlackBerry obviously was ubiquitous a few years ago, now not so much. Increasingly, the market is telling us that bring your own device is inevitable. We can no longer assume we're going to be able to control the device that people create content for. Up until very, very recently, this was a huge problem for creating training because every device needed its own specific programming. You might have one master framework that delivered your training or your communications, but it would have to be tweaked for the Samsung versus the iPad versus the iPhone. That's something that we're now past, we're very glad to say, and it's one of the reasons we wanted to show you some of this stuff today. But certainly the bring your own device, if it isn't already at your organization, it almost certainly will be within the next couple of years. So if we take as given that mobile component to compliance training is becoming increasingly essential, we all need to think now about how we're going to make sure it works on everything.
Just one comment I'd add to that, Matt, is that we've often historically thought of this character of the sales executive at the airport taking their training before a flight. In reality, mobile learning is now something that impacts all of us. Even the learners that are based at a desk would still want the option of taking their training either on a tablet or a mobile device, perhaps in a rec area away from their desk. So in terms of mobile, I think it's broadened away from being off-site to enabling us to use our mobile devices even within the same building, and allowing our learning population to choose how and when they take their training, rather than just thinking about people in hotel rooms and at the airport.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. It's not necessarily about movement so much as just being away from your desk. And you see, we all know, we take our phones everywhere. We look at them everywhere. So whenever you're not at your desk, chances are you've got your hand on your phone. Okay, let's have a look at the second idea here. HTML and Flash. So we've known for a while that Flash was on its way out. Flash is the technology that allowed us to do lots of cool stuff in our training. HTML has caught up. HTML5 allows us to do equally cool stuff in our training, so that's good news. But up until fairly recently, it took a lot of manipulation and additional work to make it compatible with a variety of different platforms. And just going back to the bring your own idea, increasingly there isn't going to be that additional budget to make something work on every device, because we can no longer identify every device. What we build needs to work on everything first time. And we're there, and I think even in the next 6 months to a year, we'll be even more there, in the sense it will be increasingly robust, increasingly flexible, and the mobile experience will elevate to the point where it is as good, if not better, than the desktop experience. But we've taken a very important step by, as an industry, being able to create single-size content that will work across different devices.
Neil, do you want to give us a walkthrough? This is actually the first time that we'll have been showing a full course running across devices, so we're pretty excited about this. No pressure on you, Neil.
Thanks, Mark. So what we have here is the introduction to our anti-bribery and corruption course. It's in desktop mode. You'll see it's full screen. And what I'm going to do here is, so I'm using the Chrome browser, and there's a little trick that if I go to the menu and I go to Tools and Developer Tools, I can then adjust the screen size, and I can replicate what that course is going to look like on different devices. So at the moment, it's in responsive mode. If I go to iPad, it will automatically go to an iPad, and I can also toggle between landscape and portrait mode. If I go to the drop-down again, I can go to, say, an iPhone 6, and then I can also see what that will look like when it adjusts to an iPhone 6. So the first piece that we wanted to share was our video. So our introductory video, I'll turn the audio on in the background as well. Some of you will be familiar, some of you won't, but essentially this is our video playing in full screen mode. This is what it would look like for our learners on a desktop device. From an instructional point of view, at this point in the course, we're presenting the fundamentals and the principles of the topic, so the basics of what are bribery and corruption. We try to keep the videos short so that when learners are taking it on a mobile device, you know, it's never more than 60 to 90 seconds in length. I'm sure you're all familiar with accessing, say, a YouTube video or something like that on your phones. It's engaging when it's short, and we don't want to go beyond that. So once we've gone through our video, and I'll go back to our iPhone mode here, we have our menu screen, and again we can adjust what that looks like on an iPad device or a tablet device. I'll click on topic 1, then we have our video, and when we move through into our scenarios, this is again, we'll see how the content will adapt to the device. So we have a full screen image of Emily here. We have to give Emily some advice based on the scenario on the left hand. You'll see the layout. So we have our user interface along the top. We have our scenario on the left, and we have our potential answers on the right, and then we have the image of Emily. When I drop that down into iPhone mode, you'll see that it's automatically prioritizing the main pieces of content that we need in order to complete the scenario. So the image of Emily as a character is now gone. We have our scenario on the top, and then we have our options here on the bottom. So I'll choose an answer. I haven't got it right. I'll give it another go. and then I've chosen my answer, the correct answer. And then here I've got my feedback as to why my answer was either correct or incorrect, so I know that my answer is right or wrong. If I have got it wrong, I know why, and I can learn from my mistake. And we would be scrolling up and down, similar to how we would be if we were reading a news article or something like that on our cell phones. Again, we have the second part of the scenario. I'll just bring it back up into iPad mode to see what it looks like there. We'll choose an answer. We can resubmit, have another go. This time I've got it right. And then again, we have our feedback screen, and we're being thanked for helping Emily, and we know why our answer was either correct or incorrect. And then finally, we move to our assessment questions. So here we've gone with binary questions. So we're testing the learner as to whether they know it or they don't, and we do that through binary questions, so yes or no, true or false, correct or incorrect. We're building up our energy bar on the top. And then again, if we toggle to iPhone mode, you'll see how the screen adapts. And it's just simply tapping on yes or no as to whether the answer is correct or incorrect. And we can get through that very quickly. What we could also do, and what we've proposed with some clients, is to isolate the questions. So take them out of the course and release it just as a question, a series of questions, maybe 6 months after they've taken the training, to track, have learners really retained their learning. And then that's the topic in a nutshell.
Can just take a quick peek at the attestation tool, Neil. I think that's a really nice little feature as well, and to see how that scales across the two devices.
Yep. So if I go back to our iPad mode, the final topic in each suite of topics is our attestation. So we have a one-screen summary of the key learning points and the key takeaways from the course. And then on the next screen, we have a series of statements that we would ask the learners to attest to. Again, if I go back to the phone mode, you'll see how that adapts to the screen size. Once we've attested, we're deemed to have completed the course.
That's fantastic. You can just share. We also recorded a quick video in the office yesterday, so there's very much. We have a full production team back in Dublin, Ireland, but it fell to us here in New York just to record a quick little clip. So we just wanted to share with you what it looks like when it's played on the device.
Yep.
You've got the audio there, Neil.
I can turn the audio on there as well.
Bribery and corruption training.
So you'll see the menu there again.
Let's explore the key areas of this topic.
Corruption is the abuse of power, or the inducement to abuse power for personal, political, or commercial gain. It's often done in secret. Bribery is a specific offense that involves the exchange of something that has value to the receiver, but it's given in the hope.
For those of you that are interested, we used Neil's hand modeling skills for this. We did a vote and decided that was the best option.
Yeah. So you'll see the screen size adapting to landscape and portrait mode for the video there, and you'll see a replication of what we saw in the emulator mode in Chrome of what the scenarios look like on the cell phone device, how we're tapping and scrolling and swiping. So rather than clicking, as I was doing previously when we saw it on the browser, you'll see the hand there is swiping and tapping. And you'll see again the content adapting to the screen size.
Just from an interesting point of view, for those of you that have done mobile learning design in the past, I think 70% of users overall, even outside of learning, prefer to use their mobile handset device in portrait orientation. And historically, it's been challenging to get content that has been designed with landscape orientation with a desktop or tablet in mind to give a good experience on a mobile. So I think we're really seeing HTML and adaptive design come to maturity, and what we have is essentially a very effective learning experience, even when we're taking on a handset held in portrait mode. Neil, that was super, and that video was really useful. We will be providing access to the actual sample course itself, as well as a little demo video, so you'll be able to experience it for yourself. Matt, do you want to lead us through the rest of the design principles, and then we'll maybe try and keep 5 minutes for questions at the end?
Very good. Okay, thanks for that, Neil. Thanks, Mark. Let's move on to the next screen now. Okay, so I think we mentioned earlier that it's no longer about the specific audience. Now it's kind of all of us at different stages. And when you think about the population in your organization, one of the reasons that we know a lot of mobile learning has been created in the past is simply because we know that the C-suite will look at the training and they're very likely to look at it on an iPad or on a mobile device. In fact, a lot of money has been spent just for that occasion, when perhaps the wider audience didn't really need it to be mobile. We feel that that's changed. I think now everyone from the shop floor to the CEO has a mobile device, usually has it with them at work, and in most cases will access some of their working content on that phone. Now, that doesn't mean we want to pipe 40-minute training programs down to somebody's iPhone, but it does mean that as we think about the wider communication piece, we do need to take the mobile into account. In fact, if we don't, we're missing a great opportunity, because people love to access content on their phone. If it's packaged right and if it's the right duration, then it works very, very effectively. And that actually brings us on to the next slide, which is around the 60-90-5 principle. So some of our compliance training modules, anti-money laundering, for example, or insider trading, might be 30 to 40 minutes. That's a long experience on a very small device. It would be a very pleasant experience on an iPad, less so on an iPhone or on a Samsung phone. Here's a good rule of thumb to create great learning experiences for mobile. 60, 90, and 5. 60 is the presentation of new material, whether that's a vignette, an animation, or a video, a little bit like the anti-bribery we saw, or just some kind of interaction or interactive screen to present new information. Give people about a minute on the phone to absorb that new information. Then give them a further 90 seconds to dive in and have a bit of a practice with some of the concepts that they've used. Show them some examples, put them into a scenario, ask them to make decisions, give them feedback on their choices. So you'll notice that even adding those two together, you still don't have a huge amount of time. On a mobile phone, if you're running something between 3 and 6 minutes in total, you're getting that good experience, which is why we have the last in our series here is 5 for the 5-minute topic. If you can ensure that your mobile phone experience doesn't go over 5 minutes, it will be a very positive experience. As soon as it starts to go over 5, you start to lose people. And this talks back to something Neil mentioned earlier, which is that all of our content is designed to be unbolted. So the video animations you saw, the scenarios, the quizzes, they can be separated out from the module, and we can deliver them to you in a way that you can deliver them as 60 or 90 second or 5-minute experiences, which actually brings us on to the next piece that I think Mark's going to walk us through.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we build adaptive e-learning, we invested heavily in building the product, but the great payback for it is that we can reuse those assets in campaigns. And when we think about a campaign, it's about touching employees frequently. It may even only be for 60 seconds, but we're drip feeding that message and it becomes part of the ongoing dialogue. So with our product or with other training that you're producing yourself, some of the areas that we can unpackage would be mobile job aids, so anything that you produce as PDFs. Assuming it's been designed for mobile viewing, it's going to work great as part of a campaign. We recommend including a message from your senior leadership, which will be something that we'll be talking about in our next webinar. But frequently, for a rollout for a new compliance program, we would include 60 to 90-second sound bites from the CEO and other senior leaders. Those are great collateral to reuse as part of a campaign 30, 60, and 90 days after the main training event. And also the animations that you saw there that Neil walked us through at the beginning, they're great to use for refresher, but they can also be an awesome teaser to give people a sneak peek of what's coming for their compliance training in 2016, 2017, and see that it's something a little bit different. The scenarios that we walked through at the end there, where we were helping a colleague that Neil demonstrated, we can unpackage those and push them out 30, 60 days after the main e-learning piece. They are fantastic for measuring the effectiveness of a training program. So I go through my primary e-learning, we collect the data, but then 60 days afterwards, we push out a scenario, and we can confirm that employees can act competently in that scenario 60 days after they've taken the main training. And then finally, those game-based quizzes that we saw, they're pretty fun. It's almost getting close to swipe left, swipe right. While the content might be serious, they're a nice challenge. There's some feedback. They're quick to get through. They would make a great resource to publish, again, 30, 60, or 90 days after the main training event. Neil, have we had any questions that have come in from the folks that we've had? And I saw we had 70 companies join today.
Yeah, so one question we had was around users who don't have audio. So do we offer closed captioning, or how does that work, particularly for the videos when taking the training on mobile devices?
Matt, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to lead through?
Yeah, sure. So it's a good question. One of the things, when we did our market research for the Compliance Learning Center, one of the things we learned was that most important to organizations was allowing people to move through this content as quickly as was appropriate. So not speed through it, not take it in, but certainly not be held back. And we made a very conscious decision to use audio in a tactical way. We have it on every screen to introduce the screen, but it's only on the video screens that it's actually driving the content. And even with the video screens, we're able to put a closed caption onto those screens, or certainly a transcript in some of our courses. So most of the screens, I would say 90% within the course, can be read without the audio. The audio enhances it, but it doesn't deliver any learning that isn't already on the screen. And for the videos, we either add closed captions or we use transcript buttons. But actually, that decision came less from an opinion on what the value of the audio, and more from the opportunity cost of having people frustrated by having to take longer in a module than they would normally by reading through it.
One thing that we found when we've transitioned from desktops to tablets and cellular devices like iPhones is, once you go to an iPhone or a tablet, people don't want to be audio dependent. So superfluous audio will annoy your learners, but people will plug in their headphones for those short bites of audio. So that's why the video vignettes are audio driven, because it's the area when somebody would value from popping in their headphones and listening to it. But for the rest of it, where they're interacting with the scenarios and the quiz questions, there's no requirement to have audio. That was a great question. Any others, Neil?
Yeah, we have a good few questions coming in. So there's been a few about LMSs. So do we need to upgrade our learner management system? How does the integration with the LMS work? Does our LMS need to be mobile? There's been a couple of questions around that.
It's a great question, and the answer is it very much depends. About a year ago, we saw strong support for Tin Can, and we were dependent upon clients upgrading to that infrastructure for them to roll out their mobile training. In reality, we're finding that most LMSs are standard support mobile learning, and for those that don't, we work with a very large retailer that we'll all be familiar with. We work with that organization to enable mobile learning on tablets and handset devices, and we didn't require them to upgrade their LMS, so we found a way to pass back the information to their LMS, which was in a legacy state, without them having to wait for the upgrade from their LMS provider. So where that infrastructure already exists, we will make the most of it and we will work to the spec. Where it isn't in place, it doesn't mean that mobile learning is switched off. There are other ways of passing back the information to your LMS. So it really is a conversation for our CTO, and we can provide guidance once we know what your situation is and what platform you're using. Maybe we'll just take one last question to wrap up, Neil.
Yeah, and then as a follow-on to that, I guess there have been a couple of questions as well around information and data security. So maybe you could speak to that.
Yes, certainly I can. I mean, a few years back, people were very hesitant about having their code of conduct training available on mobile devices, seeing what the firm's ethics policy, while somebody is hypothetically taking the training on an Amtrak train, was a red flag. Training that had sat within the organization was potentially being taken in public. Two very distinct things have happened in corporate compliance. The first is corporate compliance has become much more transparent. So whilst code of conduct was typically a vaulted document that was hidden within an organization, a lot of progressive organizations are now publicizing their code of conduct, their anti-bribery, their AML procedures, so that they're seeing as being organizations that are embracing that, and also because it benefits the overall industry. If I share my code of conduct best practices and you can learn from it, it's not hurting us as competitors, but it's improving our overall industry by being more transparent. The second piece, beyond the cultural shift of the sensitivity of this information, is we're seeing traders access their market data on mobile phones. We receive, I guess, sensitive information as email attachments, although it's password protected. So today, mobile devices are accessing a whole plethora of sensitive information. And in reality, while the information that is published in a corporate compliance program is important, it's unlikely to be as sensitive as information that routinely gets attached in emails. So e-learning fits in, but it fits in as part of your overall broader data privacy and information security policy and no longer needs something separate. Well, listen, I would like to wrap up at that stage. We've coming on close on 40 minutes, and thank you everyone for participating. Matt, it's been great to hear from your expertise. Neil, you did a super job of walking through the demo. Thank you very much, everybody. We'd love to continue the dialogue, and we really appreciate you being part of this journey with us for the past 40 minutes today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.